There's been quite a lot of chatter on the comments about Starmer's use of a vocal coach. But of course, this is entirely in order. And he's not the first Prime Minister to have had vocal and acting lessons. Sadly, Liz Truss apparently took acting lessons or took some sort of gesture lessons. And I understand she was given advice about how to use her hands. She did a lot of hand exercises, or at least she was given hand jobs to practice. Whether she did them or not, I don't know, but certainly in my assessment, her performance was as lifeless before she was a Prime Minister as it was after and during. There was no change. She was still waving her hands around ridiculously, no matter how many hand jobs she performed, no matter how much effort she made to try to look human rather than wooden. Uh, but she wasn't the first. Mrs. Thatcher's voice transformation was a carefully cultivated effort involving multiple influences, including a trip to Sir Lawrence, I think Sir Lawrence rather than Lord Olivier, the television presenter and the journalist, the television producer, Gordon Rees, who took her under his wing, and he was a sort of gruff Yorkshireman who moulded her, and he shaped not only her voice, he gave her advice, he sent her to experts, he shaped her voice, he shaped her hair. And I understand there was a professional speech coach from the Central School of Speech and Drama involved, who is probably Joan Washington, but various characters have in fact laid claim to this or have been earmarked, fingered. Gordon Rees was a former journalist turned media consultant. He played, I think, the most critical role in Thatcher's transformation, from the shrill-sounding, hectoring speaker who spoke at speed to the measured, authoritative stateswoman that we remember. Rees was hired in the mid-1970s, when she was still leader of the opposition, to overhaul her public image, which included styling, presentation, and most crucially, voice control. And he reportedly pushed for Thatcher's engagement with a voice coach, recognising that her natural tone could be off-putting, particularly in media appearances. And there's strong evidence that Rees arranged for Thatcher to consult Olivier, then the director of the National Theatre, and he advised her on lowering her pitch, slowing down her delivery, and using pauses for dramatic effect, techniques he himself had mastered on stage, particularly doing Othello. And while Thatcher rarely acknowledged his influence outright, Olivier's reputation as a master of vocal technique and presentation, a man who really knew how to present himself, suggests that she absorbed his guidance and she took advice. One of the things which is important to recognise, in contrast to Liz Truss and Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, these people who ape Theresa May, people who ape Mrs. Thatcher and Rachel Reeves, she took advice. Thatcher also took instruction from a professional voice coach. So whether or not it was Joan Washington, who was later famed for the way she coached actors in dialects, her technique was trained in was based in breathing exercises and resonance control, vocal projection, methods commonly used in actor training. And her training almost certainly would have involved, under Joan Washington, would almost certainly involved humming exercises, intonation drills, to develop a deeper, more controlled voice. And despite the careful orchestration behind her voice transformation, Thatcher was reluctant to admit that she had ever undergone such training. She wanted her new authoritative tone to appear natural rather than the result of coaching. And when pressed about it, she gave ambiguous responses, once saying with a dismissive laugh, "Yes, I suppose I have done some humming." And the vague admission sidestepped any acknowledgement of the structured coaching, the incredibly structured coaching that she would have received and the homework that she would have been encouraged to do. I think in the same interview, she also hinted that she'd been the one giving the advice rather than receiving. Do you know, it is I who have given the advice. Characteristic of her reluctance to be seen as the creation rather than the leader. And ultimately her new voice, lower in pitch, slower in pace, more commanding in tone, became one of her most effective weapons in political debate and public appearances. It was instrumental in shaping her reputation as Britain's first female Prime Minister, ensuring she was heard not as a shrill housewife, as some critics had put it, but as a formidable leader. And it was successful. And I think if Sir Keir Starmer has been receiving advice and coaching, the advice and coaching would have been to find a distinctive voice which becomes more of him, and to make it easier for him to project that voice. And so various people have said he sounds like Rodney from what's the program with names as I've forgotten the name anyway. And if that is the case, then he's created an impression, and he has and his voice coach has been successful. It's been efficacious, because what you want with voice training is to be distinctive, and he has a distinctive voice. So I would say all praise to the voice coach if that is what is what has been achieved. If it's easy for him to speak like that, then that's another purpose. It's not the job of a voice coach to change the voice particularly, but to make it what the performer wants it to be, and to find ways to ease the voice into being a true version of Keir Starmer. Certainly if I'd been giving him advice, that's what I would have wanted, to make him more Keir Starmer and ensure that he doesn't start sounding like somebody else. And I think this is precisely what she's done. And with Thatcher, slightly different objective, and that objective was definitely achieved. With Liz Truss, it was a disaster. And I'm sorry that people like Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, and indeed Kemi Badenoch, haven't taken advice, because they badly, Rishi and Boris really needed it, and Kemi Badenoch could definitely do with it, because her performance, because it is a performance, be no doubt, her performance of Prime Minister's questions is not only lackluster and useless in terms of its content, but its delivery is appalling.